I'm here with Laynie Browne.
Hello.
Hi. And Kate Colby. Hello, Kate.
Hi.
And I'm holding in my hand a marvelous book called Reverse Engineer by the poet sitting to my left, Kate Colby. Congrats on this book.
Thanks so much.
We're going to talk about a poem in this book called Problem. And I would like you please to read it, and then you and Laynie and I will talk about it for a few minutes, see how it goes.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Problem. Ephemerality of the living versus evanescence of remembrance. A difference within which I live to know, little leaves that fuck around the edges of an eddy. I will not ascend, but condense into heaven, rafters or rooftops. Answer, see above.
Laynie,
Wow.
what's your first question of this? What's the problem?
Well, I feel like it's set up in the first couplet and then it repeats. So ephemerality of the living versus evanescence of remembrance. Life has an ending, memory does not. So there's two different streams that are not resolvable with each other.
Kate, what do you think of that?
Um,
Is it awkward? No,
it's not awkward. It's just hard to close read one's
Your
own poem.
Okay.
Um,
You don't have to close read. You just have to react to the close
you
reading.
could say that's not what I had in mind.
Well, I mean, I guess there's a hair-splitting difference between ephemerality and evanescence. And what that might be is the problem of the poem.
The ephemerality of the living, superficially, semantically, refers to life is not eternal. That's all, right?
Correct.
So, an evanescence of remembrance is not the same. But evanescence is also ephemeral, but remembrance has a duration that living doesn't. So it's really a tight, that verses is not so dramatic. It's a sliced thin difference. I'm fascinated by remembrance, especially because there's a colon coming after. So help us. What is evanescent about remembrance?
Well, I guess the question is, who's doing the remembering? I don't have the answer, but I sort of intended the rememberer to be ambiguous, or maybe two-way is the right way to say it. The remembering subject has a different relationship to her memory and its longevity than those who remember her after she's gone.
And that difference between the one side of the verses and the other side of the verses is the difference that's referred to after the colon. Right? And then I must be the rememberer. Okay, Laynie, help us. A difference within which I live to know. This is so Stevensian, crazy.
So there's a
because the
flipping.
living is the live is the rememberer who, from the living in the first line, who lives to know.
As opposed to knowing to live, that seems a deliberate inversion, but then it makes life into a question. A difference within which I live to know.
And to know what, Kate? Little leaves that fuck around, that's seasonality, right? I assume. The edges of an eddy, so this is like the leaves have fallen.
Mm-hmm.
So this is autumnal. This is a sign of descent, of downturn, and of death. Seasonal death.
I would say so, yes.
So then, period, I will not ascend, but condense. So there's a paradox, because ascendance is transcendence, is life after death, presumably a reference to that.
Yep.
But so the common thought was you ascend to, I don't know, heaven or remembrance, evanescence, and yet the I doesn't do that, but condenses into heaven. How do you condense into heaven?
Well, there might be a little Niedecker in that statement.
Lorraine Niedecker, yeah.
Who referred to her
Poet's
poet practice as
As a
condensory.
Yeah.
And I do
Oh,
practice condensation in my
wait,
work.
the I is a poet,
Yeah.
or the I is a condenser. Laynie, this is a meta poem.
It is. I mean, one thing that I love about this is that stanza in the middle, there's this huge tonal
But
shift.
leaves the fuck around.
Right. I mean, it seems very philosophical.
Can you say fuck in a poem this minimal
And
without
then-
being funny?
Well, it's funny because then after this little leaves that fuck around the edges of an eddy, it's almost like saying the leaves are not really going to die. It's just like a mini death. It's a demi approaching
They're
death.
little
It's
and they
not the
fuck around.
real thing, but it pisses the speaker off. They're just fucking around, but I'm immortal human writer of poems. And then the rest of the poem goes back to this almost like sublime. You know, I read it also as kind of Dickinsonian with the rafters and rooftops, right?
Very
so
Dickinsonian.
we've got
Because
this-
heaven is, in fact, the gambrels of the sky is the roof. Yeah.
But there's a
How's
hinge
the
in the
possibility?
middle that's just kind of, it's another voice that's speaking almost.
So, Laynie, what do you do with the humor of the last line? Answer, see above.
That sends me back to the beginning. It's circular. We're not going to find the answer. The answer, we go back problem.
Kate, do you have this problem? As a poet, as a person, someone living in the life?
Do I have this problem?
Yeah, this problem.
The
and the poem is-
mortality problem? Yeah, certainly. I'll add that with the rafters or rooftops, there's a difference of, internality versus externality there.
Right.
Right. That, captures a lot of the questions of what humans are and what we're here for.
Mm-hmm. Let me try a paraphrase. Already that's a sin, right? But let me try a paraphrase that exaggerates a reading and get you to react, both of you to react to it. All right, here we go. Life versus not life but remembering life. Life versus not living but remembering. That is a difference that I live to know as I live in an environment in which there is inevitable downturn. Well, I don't know what to do with the cause and effect here, but I'm going to leave that out. I'm going to include it. And so, because of this way of thinking, when I go to heaven, it won't be ascent. It'll be condensing. And I'm not sure whether it's interior or exterior. The answer to the question is the question that I posed at the beginning, which is, what is the difference between experiencing life as you're living it and imagining the thin slicing of remembering it? That's the problem. Oh boy, that was hard. And you shouldn't paraphrase, especially in front of the poet. How did I do?
Very well. I think there's also a final moment where that questions what heaven is or might be if you can't see outside of it, if you can't look at it. So seeing above the rafters or the rooftops that constitute whatever heaven is would be the poet's idea of heaven. Like what is heaven if you can't write about it and see it and talk about it and be external to it.
Mm.
So there's kind of a struggle there to always stay outside of the problem at hand.
Wow. It's profound. Okay, Laynie, I have a question for you, and then
All
the
right.
three of us will just do final thoughts on
Okay.
this. How you doing, Kate?
Oh,
Is-
I'm good.
Is this fun?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
into it.
Okay. Laynie, would a poet, a person who was not Niedekerian and Dickinsonian, have such a problem? Is this a problem particularly for the condenserer who thinks this way about internals and externals?
I think it's a both and. So if you come to the, not an either or, so if you come to the poem without those readings, then there's still an amazing experience of the poem. And I'm just thinking about this phrase, I will not ascend but condense into heaven. I mean, just sonically, it's so interesting, even without thinking about the condensory and the poet. But just the problem of mortality, because we don't know what happens. Is it a problem? It is if you think about it. We don't know what's going to happen.
That's my point.
But condense, I will not ascend, but condense into heaven. It has a great, I'd sign up for that, not knowing what it is.
I'm obsessed with the Nidakarian poet, who is in turn obsessed with the exact idiom here. You don't ascend into, you ascend to, but you condense into because it's the byproduct of the condensation. The idea that someone could go into heaven is not the common conception of heaven, is remarkable. It's remarkable that you could put into in front of heaven. Kate, what do you think of all this? This is you thinking that? This is something you think about, Kate Colby?
Well, yeah, when I consider my own eventual death, the idea of being free of one's earthly obsessions and preoccupations is supposed to be liberating. But to me, that's the worst thing about contemplating my own death, is to be free of your mind and your ability to analyze and
that's really
understand.
A problem, isn't it?
It is a problem.
All right, final thoughts. Laynie, final thought on this poem called Problem?
Final thought is that I'm reminded of a poem by Fanny Howe, which I want to say it was Descent, and we did a poem talk on it. I might be getting the title wrong, but there are different conceptions of heaven and ascending and descending, and there's also this raucousness in the middle that I wish I could quote it. There's a baby image in it that's magnificent. Do you have it? You've got it?
I don't have it in my head, but I remember the discussion.
So I just want to recommend that everybody find that poem by Fanny Howe and read it.
Poem talk about it.
Read it alongside this poem, and I'm wondering if that's in this for you or not necessarily. Just
not consciously, but I adore Fanny, and I think we share a lot of preoccupations. Mm-hmm. So thank you.
Kate, final thought?
Do I have a final thought? I suppose I can add something to the reading, which is a thing that I do, I think, somewhat reflexively as a poet, with the little leaves fucking around the edges of an eddy, just being a textural contrast with the preceding kind of heavy, philosophical, even lugubrious language.
Yes, plus the ENCE noun, the LITY noun. This is like big falutin stuff.
Right. So sometimes you have to undercut it with something tossed off. And that's just what happened here.
Yeah. Little leaves that fuck around the edges of an eddy. The edges of an eddy. Yeah. There's poetry there. And there's poetry in the decline, as Keats would remind us. There's poetry in death, or in the descent into death. Into. Final thought, I think you're very funny. I think you're a funny poem. The funniest thing, of course, is answer, see above. The second funniest thing is the little leaves that fuck around. And the third is subtle. I don't know if I'm going to be able to describe it that well, but hear it now. Ephemerality of the living versus evanescence of remembrance, a difference within which I live to know. The second use of live there is comic.
Yep.
Because in the equation of living versus having to remember, maybe after death or whatever, be remembered, you have to live in order to know the question and the problem. So you're doing this fun recursion that is, I call it Stevensian. I'm thinking sort of snowman-like logic, you know.
Thank you.
So, Laynie, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Kate.
so much.
The author, thank you. The book is Reverse Engineer by Kate Colby, who is sitting to my left. Tell us about the design here. What is that? Is that a person contemplating the problem?
It's a painting by L.S. Lowry, who is known for being a member, sort of an uneducated artist and member of the Ashcan School of Painters. And I just love that you can't tell if she's facing forward with her hair over her face or
Right.
backwards.
Or in mourning?
If you read the title of the painting, there's an answer. But
What is
I
the
like
title
the
of the
ambiguity
painting?
of
Do we
it.
know what it is?
It's like,
Girl seen from the back.
there you go.
That answers the question.
That answers
Thank you
the
both.
question.
This was wonderful.
Thank you.